Nancy Vaughn stood near the bar, her black heels discarded, her legs bare beneath the hem of a tailored pencil skirt. Her hair was slicked back from the rain, lips parted as she held a tumbler of scotch. James was behind her, watching. She didn't speak first. She didn't have to. Their eyes had said everything downstairs at the event, across the ballroom, across the boardroom banter, across the dismissive men who saw her as decoration, not disruption. But James? Hello, my beautiful family. Welcome to Love and Twilight with Dr. Phillips. Here, every story is more than just words. It's a heartbeat that speaks to love, hope, and healing. Before we begin, let me know you're here with me. Drop "I'm ready," Dr. Phillips in the comments. Don't forget to hit the like button to keep this love flowing, and, if you're new, subscribe so you never miss a moment of this journey. He saw her as danger, and now, here she was, in his suite, her fingers pressing against the glass, watching the rain trail like tears. "You don't look like someone who settles," she said quietly. Her voice was velvet and defiance. "I don't," James replied, stepping closer. "But you feel like the exception." He didn't ask to kiss her. He just did. Their mouths crashed like thunder on glass. He pinned her back against the window, uncaring if the city could see. Her fingers threaded into his hair, nails scraping the back of his neck. Her thighs lifted to his hips like muscle memory. Nancy gasped when his hands gripped the backs of her knees and lifted her onto the ledge. "You're insane," she whispered against his jaw. "And you're still here," he growled, pushing the fabric of her blouse aside. She didn't stop him. She didn't ask what this meant. She simply let go. Let go of expectations. Let go of roles. Let go of everything but the ache rising in her gut as he slid inside her, slowly, deeply, deliberately. The rain tapped the windows like impatient fingers. But inside, they made a different kind of storm. "Say something," he whispered, breath trembling as he held her hips still, as though the moment itself could vanish. But Nancy didn't speak. She just moved. Her hips rocked against his, her breath caught in his collarbone. She rode that line between hunger and reverence, like she'd been starved and just discovered a feast. It wasn't sweet. It was necessary. Every grind, every groan, every gasp was a declaration that they didn't need forever. Not tonight. Just this. And James? James had never known a woman like her. Not one who took what she wanted without flinching. Not one who could destroy him with a look and heal him with a kiss. They climaxed together like fire meeting gasoline, her cry lost in his mouth, his grip leaving marks on her thighs. But what ruined him, what absolutely destroyed him, was what came after. The stillness. She curled into his side on the velvet chaise lounge, her bare foot dangling off the edge, eyes closed. And she didn't ask him for anything. Not his name, not his number, not his future. Just presence. And that was the most terrifying thing of all. The silence that followed that night in the Gotham Tower wasn't empty. It was loud in a way only stillness can be, where touch did all the talking, and breath was the only. Punctuation between two broken people who hadn't yet realized they were breaking each other open. Nancy rose before sunrise. She gathered her blouse, fixed her skirt, and slipped her heels on like armor. James stirred on the chaise, one hand still resting in the space where she'd lain minutes before. "You're not staying?" he asked, voice hoarse. She looked over her shoulder, not with guilt, not with regret. "I wasn't supposed to," she replied. Then she walked out. No phone number, no clever goodbye, no hint that she'd remember the shape of his mouth for years. She left like a woman who hadn't just rewritten the meaning of the word intimacy. And James? He just sat there, stunned, not by her body, but by her exit. She was the first woman he ever slept with who didn't ask for a future. And somehow, that made him want to give her one. It wasn't a one-night thing, not even close. They met again, and again, sometimes in his penthouse, sometimes in the back of a chauffeured car, her moans muffled by the leather seat, sometimes on top of his desk, papers flying as she dug her nails into his back. But no matter how often they touched, the rules never changed. No expectations, no titles, no soft talk about dreams or timelines. Just desire, and the haunting presence of someone who made the world disappear when she looked at you. "Why do you never ask me where this is going?" he once asked, brushing her hair off her shoulder as she buttoned her blouse. "Because I don't want to ruin it," she answered. "Some things lose their magic when you put a leash on them. It should have ended, but It didn't, because James started to crave more than her body. He began to crave the way she never tried to own him. And Nancy? Nancy craved the way he watched her, like she was more than just beautiful. Like she was dangerous, and he wanted to play with fire anyway. They didn't define it, but it defined them. Board meetings turned into glances. Glances turned into texts. Texts turned into need. Soon, she was at every gala by his side, every launch party, every closed-door deal. Still no ring, still no label, but everyone knew. She wasn't just a woman on his arm. She was the woman who had his attention, a currency more powerful than love in James Adams' world. The city kept spinning, but somewhere between stock options and silent kisses, the rules started to blur. She began to sleep over. He began to tell her things. About his childhood, about his fear of dying without leaving a legacy, about his obsession with empire, about how every man in his family passed down the business like a crown, and how he was the only Adam man without a son. "Does it scare you?" she once asked, curled against his chest after a long night. "Yes," he confessed, "but you scare me more." "Why?" "Because with you, I forget why I cared about any of that." She didn't reply. She just held him tighter. Not with words, but with presence. The same kind that terrified him the first night, because it demanded nothing, but meant everything. Love rarely announces its arrival. It creeps in between morning coffee and shared silence, between her head on his shoulder while reading investor reports and the way his hand always found hers beneath tables during high-stakes dinners. For a while, that was enough. Nancy believed they were building something, maybe not with blueprints, but with touch, with time, with trust. But James was watching the clock tick, and every tick was another reminder. He had no heir. It started with a question. "Do you ever think about having kids?" he asked one night, lying in bed, fingers drawing lazy lines on her thigh. Nancy smiled softly. "Someday, yes. I don't mean someday. I mean, soon." She turned to face him. "Is this a business proposal, James?" "It's a legacy concern." Her smile faded. "Well, forgive me if I don't want to be reduced to a succession plan." He sat up, jaw tightening. "That's not what I meant, isn't it?" The air between them grew tense, not angry, just uncertain. He reached for her, and she let him. But that night, their bodies moved with less urgency, because something sacred had been introduced, expectation. Weeks passed. James became quieter, colder. Their nights lost their rhythm. Their kisses lost heat. She still showed up, because love, when real, doesn't run from the chill. It tries to warm it. But James wasn't letting her in anymore. His focus sharpened elsewhere, on quarterly reports, bloodline discussions. With his father, hushed conversations with estate attorneys. Nancy heard things. From staff. From society, women with too much time and not enough grace. He's probably looking for someone younger. She hasn't given him a child. What did she expect? The words stung, but Nancy never confronted him. Instead, she booked an appointment. Fertility specialist. Early checkup. Nothing wrong, the doctor said. But the numbers weren't promising either. Nancy didn't cry. She nodded, thanked him, and went home to a man who no longer touched her like she was his home. One night, she tried. She stood in the doorway of their bedroom, wearing nothing but his dress shirt. "Do you still want me?" she asked. James was loosening his tie, staring into the mirror. "Of course I do." But his voice held no hunger. She walked to him, pressed her bare chest to his back, slid her arms around him. He didn't turn. "It's not you," he said quietly. "It's fate. I chose wrong." Those words gutted her more than silence ever could. "Then let fate have you," she whispered, backing away. He didn't follow. He didn't stop her. He just let her stand there naked, alone, like a painting he no longer wanted to look at. Nancy didn't sleep that night. She sat by the window, watching the city blink without emotion. The woman who once wore ambition like perfume now sat draped in doubt. But even then, she held on to faith. Faith that love wasn't about bloodlines. Faith that something inside her still mattered. And it was that same faith, quiet, persistent, unshakable, that would be rewarded with 2 pink lines a few months later. But by then, James would already be gone. By their 10th anniversary, the whispers had become loud enough to echo across charity galas and boardrooms. Still no child? She's lovely, but what about the Adam legacy? He'll have to make a choice eventually. Nancy heard every word. She smiled through them, nodded, raised her champagne glass and gripped it so tightly her knuckles turned pale. But behind closed doors, there was no more pretending. James no longer looked at her the same way. There was no hunger in his stare, no fire in his touch, only evaluation, a cold audit of the woman he had once pressed against windows like she was air. He began coming home later, started speaking in bullet points instead of affection. The board wants a contingency plan. My father asked about adoption again. Our state attorney says without a biological heir, tax protection gets complicated. Nancy bit her tongue so often she forgot what it felt like to speak freely. But one night, she snapped. You talk about our child like it's a checkbox. James didn't flinch. It is a checkbox, Nancy. Whether you like it or not, this family, this empire, requires succession. And what about love? She said, voice breaking. Does that fit anywhere on your precious list? He looked at her then, but not with remorse, with finality. Love doesn't secure shares. That was the night something shifted, not in him, but in her. She still tried. Doctor visits, hormone injections, late-night research about fertility diets. She endured the pain of needles and the humiliation of forms that asked invasive questions. James never came to appointments. He'd text. Meeting ran late. He'd call. Good luck. Let me know what they say. He never said we. It was always her womb, her failure, her burden. They considered IVF. Twice. The first time, the eggs didn't take. The second time, the embryos didn't survive the transfer. Nancy cried in the back seat of the car while he checked emails beside her. We can try again, she whispered. James didn't respond. He just tapped his screen and murmured, We're already late for the gala. They posed for photos that night, Nancy in a silver gown that hugged her aching body. James in a black tux, smiling like nothing was missing. When a journalist asked, Any children yet? He chuckled and answered, still trying. But when they walked away, he muttered under his breath, At some point, we have to stop pretending this is working. She stared at him. Not because it was cruel, but because it was true. She had just hoped he wouldn't say it. Not out loud. That winter, she decorated the penthouse by herself. Tiny, white lights. Crystal garlands. Stockings she knew would stay empty. She placed 3 toy bears on the fireplace mantel, wishful thinking shaped like softness. James came home late that night. He saw the bears and scoffed. You're clinging to a fantasy, and you're clinging to a board seat, she replied quietly. I need more than hope, Nancy. I need a family. I am your family, she snapped. No, you're just my wife. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. Some words cut deeper when whispered. The following morning, she woke up alone. His side of the bed was cold. The 3rd IVF cycle had been scheduled. She canceled it. And when the doctor's office called to confirm, she simply said, It's not necessary anymore. Because something inside her had already died. And no child, not even a miracle, could grow in the soil of a heart that had been stepped on too many times. Or so she thought, until the test. Until the laugh that turned into a sob in the hotel bathroom. Until the doctor said, 3 heartbeats, spontaneous triplets, no meds, no intervention. Their bedroom used to be a sanctuary. Now, it was a museum of loss. White sheets that once knew only passion now bore the weight of a woman abandoned in plain sight. Nancy lay still most nights, pretending not to feel the cold space beside her, pretending not to hear the footsteps that no longer paused at her side. She wasn't waiting for him to come to bed anymore. She was waiting for herself to wake up. James still lived in the penthouse, still played the perfect host, still smiled at charity functions, still signed checks for causes she cared about. But behind the closed doors of their marriage, they were strangers. The driver's outside, he said one morning, not looking up from his coffee. I canceled the event, she replied, voice flat. Why? I didn't feel like pretending. He stirred his cup, unaffected. Well, next time give me notice. It makes us look disjointed. Disjointed? She nearly laughed, as if this wasn't a shipwreck long drowned, and he was still worried about the optics of the floating debris. That night, she tried again. Just one more attempt. She waited for him, nude beneath the sheets, bathed in nothing but lamplight and hope. James walked in, tired from a long day, loosened his tie, and paused at the edge of the bed. She met his eyes, vulnerable, open. "Do you still see me?" she whispered. He looked at her for a long time, and then he shook his head, not in cruelty, in quiet surrender. "I don't know who you are anymore." Nancy sat up, dragging the blanket to her chest. "Then let me remind you," she said, her voice trembling. But he was already moving to the guest room. That door closed with finality. It didn't slam. It didn't creak. But it shattered something inside her. She didn't get out of bed for 2 days. She barely drank water, didn't eat, didn't cry, because the tears had dried long ago. What was left was something worse: numbness. On the 3rd day, the housekeeper found her still lying there, unshowered, unmoving. The woman didn't ask questions, just brought in a tray with toast, tea, and a folded note. Nancy opened it, expecting something from James, but it was a bill, a fertility specialist consultation, for him. Alone, no discussion, no inclusion, just replacement. Nancy stared at the envelope, then stared at the ceiling, and quietly whispered, "Enough." She got up, took a long shower, put on a black dress, and drove herself to a luxury hotel 3 blocks from the penthouse. She booked a suite, not to escape, but to breathe. She sat on the marble floor of the bathroom, legs crossed, arms limp, heart raw, and for the first time in years, she prayed. Not for James, not for a child, but for herself. "Help me feel like I'm still alive," she whispered to no one. "Help me remember who I was before I became a womb with a deadline." And somewhere between the silence and the tile, she laughed, because something fluttered in her stomach. No poetry, no cue from the heavens, just a twist, a tug, a possibility. She didn't wait. She rushed downstairs to the pharmacy in the lobby, bought 5 different brands, ran back up, and within 15 minutes, every single test lit up, positive. All of them. Nancy dropped to her knees, not from grief this time, but from awe. Her hand trembled over her belly. "It's real," she whispered. "You're real." And just as the joy settled in her chest, she remembered. James, his words, his absence, his indifference. She wiped her face, sat up straight, and swore a vow, not out loud, but with the fire of a woman reborn. "You'll never hear the words 'you were a mistake.' Not from him, not from anyone. These children would never beg for love, because she would give it to them in overflow, with or without a man beside her." The hotel bathroom was filled with soft morning light streaming through half, open blinds and catching the edges of white ceramic and gold fixtures. Nancy sat cross-legged on a plush towel, surrounded by sticks lined up in perfect formation across the counter. 5, all positive. Her heart pounded, but she didn't cry, not this time. She laughed, a small breathless sound, like a gasp of air after drowning for years. "I'm pregnant," she whispered to herself, over and over. "I'm really pregnant." But the universe wasn't finished, because what came next didn't just change her life, it redefined it. Her OBGYN was an old friend, discreet and sharp. Nancy sat on the table, paper gown rustling, cold gel pressed to her belly. She gripped the edges of the exam chair like it might fly away with her. The wand moved. The screen flickered. And then, 3, separate, pulses. The doctor paused, zoomed in, zoomed out, then smiled, wide and stunned. "Nancy, it's triplets." She blinked. "Excuse me?" "Spontaneous triplets. No meds. No IVF. You hit a genetic jackpot. This is rare. This is magical." Nancy didn't hear the rest. She stared at the ceiling, her hands over her mouth, breath caught in the middle of a laugh and a cry. 3 heartbeats. 3 lives. 3 reasons not to look back. That night, Nancy sat alone in her hotel suite. The city stretched endlessly beyond the window. She pressed her palm to her abdomen, now sacred, and she made a decision. She would leave quietly. No dramatic confrontations, no teary announcements. James didn't deserve to know. Not yet. Not when he'd already buried her under titles like disappointment and wrong choice. This miracle wasn't his reward. It was her redemption. The next morning, She went home one last time. She walked through the penthouse like a guest, running her fingers across counters, inhaling the sterile scent of fresh linen and unlit candles. She didn't pack much, just enough to disappear without suspicion. Before leaving, she placed her wedding ring on the console beside the foyer. No note, no message, just silence. The same silence he'd offered her for months. Only this one had dignity in it. James didn't call, didn't come looking, didn't ask where she'd gone. It was the final proof she needed. He hadn't just lost interest, he had already let her go. He just didn't know that in losing her, he was also losing everything. Weeks passed. Nancy found a midwife who specialized in high-risk multiples. She rented a quiet brownstone on the edge of Manhattan. No press, no rumors, just peace. The pregnancy wasn't easy. Her body ached in places she didn't know existed. The nausea was constant. Her ankles swelled. She barely slept, but every kick reminded her why it was worth it. Isolde, Ivy, Noelle, 3 names, 3 identities, chosen in secret, carried with reverence, protected with fire. One day, as she rocked slowly on the porch in her 3rd trimester, a neighbor approached. Expecting? Nancy nodded, hand on her belly. 3 girls. The woman's eyes widened. Lord have mercy, your husband must be over the moon. Nancy smiled softly. They don't have a father. The woman blinked, unsure what to say. Nancy just continued rocking. She didn't need pity. She didn't need applause. She had what she needed, and it was kicking from inside her every single day. James Adam never believed in ghosts, but when he came home to an empty penthouse that Christmas Eve, he began to understand how a place could be haunted, not by spirits but by silence. The scent of cinnamon and cedar still hung in the air. The lights on the balcony twinkled, untouched, and on the polished console table by the elevator lay her wedding ring, a simple band of platinum, no note, no goodbye, just that quiet circle of metal, a full stop at the end of their unfinished sentence. Earlier that day, James had gone to work like it was any other. He took meetings, signed contracts, approved budgets. His assistant asked if he'd be home early. There's no point, he muttered, sliding his pen across another document. When he did finally return, he expected to find her crying, or waiting with that look, half pity, half confrontation. Instead, no one. Just soft jazz playing from the home automation system, a glass of untouched wine on the counter, and her heels neatly placed by the door. It unnerved him. Nancy never left things tidy when she was upset. This wasn't impulsive. This was final. He walked into the bedroom. The bed was made. The closet empty on one side. She had taken only what she needed. No dramatic suitcase trail, no chaos, no confrontation, just absence. He sat down on the edge of the mattress, his jaw clenched. He didn't feel panic. Not yet. Only annoyance. So this is how you choose to leave, he said aloud to no one. But even as the words left his mouth, something deeper pulled at his gut. He glanced toward the window, the same one where he used to press her body when they couldn't wait until the bedroom, when she was still his sanctuary, when she still looked at him like he was more than a last name and an empire. He poured himself a drink, 1 finger of bourbon, then 2. He stared at the ring again. How something so small could carry so much weight was beyond him. Over the next few days, he didn't tell anyone. Not his father, not his board, not the media. He kept the absence hidden, because admitting she was gone meant acknowledging he had failed. And James Adam never failed, at least not publicly. But alone in his apartment, her absence was a thunderclap behind every quiet moment. The scent of her shampoo lingered in the pillows. A single red dress still hung on the back of the bathroom door. And once, at 2 a.m., he opened the fridge and saw the almond milk she always bought for herself and almost called her. Almost, but he didn't, because pride is a dangerous thing. It convinces you to swallow loss rather than chase forgiveness. Weeks passed, then months. James threw himself into work like it could replace emotion. He dated, here and there. Nothing stuck. No one looked at him the way Nancy did. No one let him exist without performing. He started dreaming about her. Not sexual dreams. Memory dreams. The way she'd eat strawberries straight from the box while reading investor briefs. The way she whispered, You need me more than I need you, with a smirk she never meant as cruelty. And then he'd wake up. To silence, to regret he didn't recognize yet as love. He never knew about the pregnancy, never knew that in walking away, Nancy had taken the only part of him that mattered. He thought she left out of spite. He thought she left because she couldn't deliver what he demanded. He thought wrong, and the truth would find him when he least expected it, in the form of 3 little girls, with his eyes, her fire, and a word he never thought he'd hear again, Mommy. In the first month after leaving James, Nancy wrote him every night, not to send, just to breathe. The pages piled up in a leather-bound journal she kept tucked under the drawer of her nightstand, out of reach but close enough to haunt her. She never used his full name, never opened with "Dear." Each entry began like a whisper and ended in silence. It wasn't a confession, it was a purge, a place to empty the words she couldn't speak aloud without unraveling. Entry 1. You hurt me without ever raising your voice. That's the part I don't think you'll ever understand. Silence can bruise too. Entry 4. I wanted to scream when you blamed fate. You made choices. Don't pretend the universe did it for you. Entry 9. There was a version of me that would have begged, but she died the night you looked through me like a cracked vase, pretty, empty, replaceable. The ink smeared on more than one page. Pregnancy hormones made her weep at the smallest things. An old song, a forgotten perfume bottle, a voicemail she couldn't bring herself to delete. Hey, it's me, running late again. Save me a plate. She never listened past the first line. But she never erased it either, because for all the wounds he left, there was a time he made her feel like the center of his world. And that time deserved to exist, even if he didn't earn the future that bloomed inside her now. Entry 17th. I don't hate you, but I hate who I became while loving you. Always waiting, always trying, always proving. I didn't even notice when my heart started limping. Sometimes she thought about telling him, writing one final letter, dropping it on his desk. No confrontation, no request, just truth. You're a father. But every time she imagined his reaction, her hand froze mid-sentence. Would he demand access? Would he try to claim them like assets? Would he throw words like custody and image and last name? She didn't want her daughters raised as trophies in someone's legacy campaign. She wanted them raised in laughter, in safety, in love. So she tore the final letter up, not in anger, in peace, because the story didn't belong to him anymore. It belonged to Isolde, who kicked the hardest when she heard piano music, to Ivy, who fluttered every time her mother sipped cocoa, and to Noelle, who stayed perfectly still, until Nancy laughed. Then she'd twist, like joy had a heartbeat of its own. These were the real pages now, living chapters, no pen needed. She tucked the journal away one final time, locked it in a small trunk and slid it under her bed. That night, she stood in the mirror and traced her reflection. Round belly, tired eyes, the faint glow of resilience returning to her skin. They will never feel unwanted, she whispered. Not like she had, not like James made her feel. She blew out the candle by her bedside and whispered one last line into the darkness. They will grow up knowing I chose them, not to prove something, not to keep a man, but because they were mine, first, always, and forever. Spring came late that year. The trees in Manhattan hesitated to bloom. The wind still carried a bite, and the skyline looked grayer than usual. But inside a small brownstone tucked in the quiet part of the city, Nancy bloomed. Her belly swelled, stretching her skin, her limits, and her soul. She talked to the girls each morning, named them before they were born, read to them, rubbed cocoa butter on her stomach and whispered bedtime stories before they'd ever seen the light of day. She wasn't just preparing to be a mother, she was becoming one. She didn't hire a nurse, didn't post about the pregnancy. She didn't need validation, she needed stillness. And the girls gave her that. Every kick, every flutter, every hiccup in the womb reminded her that joy didn't need approval to exist. She decorated their nursery herself. Soft pink curtains, shelves lined with identical teddy bears. 3 tiny cribs side by side like a sacred rhythm. She stitched each name on a blanket by hand, Isolde, Ivy, Noelle. No monograms, no initials tying them to a legacy that once tried to erase them before they existed. Meanwhile, Just 6 miles away in a penthouse that once buzzed with laughter and light, James was unraveling. Not publicly, no headlines, no scandals, but behind the sleek marble walls of his domain, he was coming undone. He told himself he was thriving. More deals, bigger numbers, longer board meetings. He traveled more, smiled less. He replaced Nancy's space in the closet with new suits. But not a single woman had stayed. Not one made him pause mid-sentence during dinner. Not one wore his shirts like they belonged to them. Not one ever asked, "Why do you always look like you're about to run from something?" Because only Nancy ever asked questions that hurt in ways he needed to feel. He checked her social media once. Nothing. She'd wiped it clean, vanished from the circles that used to orbit around his. He didn't tell anyone he missed her. He didn't have to. It showed in his posture, in the way he poured 3 drinks and only sipped 1, and how he'd sit in the dark on Friday nights, staring at the skyline like it owed him answers. His father called once to ask why he hadn't moved on. "You're still young, James. You need to remarry. Secure the line." James rubbed his temples. Not everything is about the line. Everything is about the line. That's the price of being who we are. He didn't argue. Because, what would he say? That he threw away the only woman who ever saw the man, not the fortune? That he chose legacy over love and now had neither? One night, alone with a bottle of scotch and the city buzzing outside his window, James opened his email drafts. There were a dozen unsent messages. To her. None finished. All of them began with the same line. I shouldn't have said that. But every time he tried to finish, he remembered her walking away barefoot on marble. No fight, no demand, no trace. She hadn't just left. She'd released him. And somehow, that felt worse. Back in her brownstone, Nancy stood in front of a full-length mirror. Her belly curved beneath a pale blue maternity dress. She wasn't hiding anymore. She turned to the side and ran her fingers along her profile. "You're almost here," she whispered to the girls. And for the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid of what came next. The city was buzzing with holiday energy. It was the first week of December, lights strung across street lamps, choirs rehearsing in the background, and the air sharp enough to sting bare fingers. James Adam wasn't supposed to be there. He rarely attended the events his company sponsored. His assistant had already arranged a generous donation to the local children's winter concert. All he had to do was stay home. But something compelled him to go. He told himself it was obligation, but the truth? He didn't want to be alone that day. Not again. The black Maybach pulled to a gentle stop in front of the school auditorium. The driver opened the rear door, and James stepped out, adjusting his coat collar as a gust of cold wind kissed his jaw. He was about to walk toward the side entrance until something caught the corner of his eye. A flash of navy blue. He turned, and time paused. There she was, Nancy. Her raven black hair was braided and tucked into her coat. She was kneeling on the sidewalk just past the front steps, one hand tying a shoelace on a child's boot, the other brushing crumbs from another's cheek. 3 girls, identical, tiny, beautiful. Nancy smiled at one of them, whispering something that made the girl giggle behind mitten-covered hands. Another clutched a paper snowflake, and the third, restless, curly-haired, wide-eyed, pointed directly at James. "Mommy," she said aloud. "Who's that man?" The sound shattered him. "Mommy." He froze mid-step. Everything else fell away. The concert, the wind, the city behind him. It was just that word, from a voice so high-pitched, so innocent, that it sliced deeper than any insult ever had. Nancy stood slowly. Her eyes met his. No panic, no welcome, just recognition, like seeing a ghost you once loved. James couldn't speak. His throat clamped shut. He took a step forward, unthinking. The girl who had pointed at him now stepped behind Nancy's leg, peeking out with cautious curiosity. The other 2 didn't notice him, but Nancy did. Every inch of him. His shock, his fear, his regret. "You shouldn't be here," she said, calmly. Her voice was the same, gentle, steady, tethered. "Neither should you," he replied, somehow managing to find words. "But here we are." She crouched down again, buttoning a jacket, zipping a coat. The girls shifted around her like petals clinging to their stem. They were hers. They were his. And he knew it. He stepped closer, stopped at a respectful distance. "Nancy." he whispered. She didn't look up. "I'm not doing this here," she replied. "They're mine," he said softly, not even fully believing the sound of his own voice. "They're ours," she corrected, finally rising to meet his eyes. "But they're mine first, because I stayed, because I carried them, because I didn't walk away." He swallowed hard, the guilt rising like smoke in his lungs. "You could have told me, and what would you have done?" She snapped, just loud enough for only him to hear. "Rebranded them into your empire? Gave them numbers instead of names? Hired a PR firm to make you look like a hero?" He flinched, because she wasn't wrong, and she knew it. One of the girls tugged on her coat. "Mommy, are we going in?" Nancy nodded and gave James one last look. "I'm only telling you this once," she said quietly. "You don't get to decide what this moment means. You gave up the right to shape our story." James's jaw clenched. "I just want to know them." She studied him, measured the crack in his voice, then turned toward the girls. "Come on, angels." They took her hands, and just like that, they walked past him, not in anger, in power. Nancy didn't rush, didn't look back. She walked like a woman who had nothing to prove, and 3 living, breathing reasons not to. James stood alone on the sidewalk. People passed him. Car horns hummed in the distance, but he couldn't move. His eyes stayed fixed on the doors they had just walked through. 3 little girls, same eyes, same jawline, same shape of his mother's smile. He had been searching for meaning in quarterly reports, and somehow his entire future had been living without him. The concert was beautiful. Paper snowflakes dangled from the ceiling. Tiny violins squeaked through carols, and somewhere between Jingle Bells and Silent Night, Nancy forgot how fast her heart was beating. Her girls were radiant. Noelle waved at the crowd like she was queen of the stage. Ivy adjusted her dress 3 times before every song started. And Isolde, her little firecracker, couldn't stop turning to check if Nancy was watching. She was, but the moment they stepped outside, the questions began. Isolde tugged her coat sleeve first. "Mommy." "Yes, love?" "Who was that man looking at us?" Nancy kept her gaze ahead. "Just someone from work," Noelle chimed in. "He looked like me." Ivy nodded thoughtfully. "His eyebrows. They looked like mine, right?" Nancy crouched in front of them, trying not to let her face betray anything. "Some people just look familiar, sweethearts. That doesn't mean anything." Isolde tilted her head. "But he stared at you like he knew you." Nancy's breath caught. Children had a way of slicing through pretense without trying. She smiled. "Let's go home. We'll have hot cocoa and cinnamon toast. Deal?" They didn't push. Not then. But she could feel the shift, the curiosity, the pattern recognition that only triplets share, 3 minds always thinking in chorus. That night, while the girls colored in their notebooks, Nancy stood in the kitchen, fingers wrapped around a mug of tea that had long gone cold. Her phone buzzed once. No caller ID, no message, but she knew it was him. She sat at the edge of her bed later, staring at a faded photo from a gala 5 years ago. James, in a black suit, hand around her waist, both of them smiling like nothing could ever break them. She'd kept it, not out of sentiment, but as proof that it wasn't all in her head, that once he did choose her. Before the silence, before the ring on the console, the bedroom door creaked open. Isolde tiptoed in, dragging her blanket behind her. Nancy patted the bed, and her daughter climbed in without a word. After a moment, "Mommy, is he the traveler?" Nancy blinked. "What do you mean?" "The man from today. Is he the traveler? The one you said we're waiting for?" Nancy's throat tightened. She had told them stories growing up, that their father was far away, a traveler, a kind man who sent love from the stars. It was easier than saying, "He gave up before you were born." She brushed Isolde's curls back. "He might be," she said softly. Isolde looked up. "Then why did he look sad?" Nancy didn't answer. She didn't have to. Later that night, she stood outside on the back porch, wrapped in a blanket, staring up at a sky that had no answers. James had found them. That was inevitable. But what came next? That was hers to control. She wouldn't let him rewrite history. Not with money. Not with apologies. Not with sweet words dressed in regret. Because now, she had more than feelings to protect. She had 3 reasons to never be weak again. James Adams sat in the back of his Maybach, engine idle, eyes fixed on the school doors long after they closed. He wasn't breathing. Not really. His mind kept replaying it, the girl with the curls, the one who pointed at him and said, "Mommy, who's that man?" The words echoed, slower each time. He didn't need a DNA test. He didn't need paperwork. He saw it in their eyes, in their posture, in their existence. They were his. The driver turned slightly. "Sir?" James didn't answer, just stared. Chest tight, thoughts louder than traffic. He had spent years chasing a legacy, preparing a throne for an heir he thought would never come. And now there were three, not in a nursery, not in a plan, in real life, walking, talking, pointing at strangers, asking questions with eyes too familiar. How had he missed this? How had he let her walk away with everything that ever mattered? Back at the penthouse, he poured a drink he didn't touch. He sat on the leather couch, elbows on knees, face in his hands. His phone was on the coffee table. He stared at it. Nancy's number wasn't saved anymore, but he still remembered it. Muscle memory, like the way his fingers once knew the path down her back. He tapped her number, paused, then deleted it again. Coward. That's what she would have called him. She wouldn't scream. She never did. She'd just say it softly, like a truth too honest to hate. You wanted heirs, and now you're a stranger to your own blood. He could hear her voice saying it, even if she never would. The next morning, he didn't go to work. He walked instead. No driver, no assistant trailing behind, just him, in a coat that felt too expensive for the weight he was carrying. He passed bookstores, coffee shops, bakeries, and then, instinctively, found himself in front of her brownstone, not knocking, just standing there, hands in his pockets, watching. He didn't know what he was waiting for. An answer? Permission? A miracle? The curtains fluttered upstairs. A light flicked off. Nothing else. He went back to his loft that night, different from the penthouse. He had moved there a year ago. Said he wanted something quieter. Truth was, he couldn't walk past the bedroom where her perfume still lingered. Couldn't look at the kitchen counter where she once danced barefoot, singing off-key with a wine glass in hand. Now he sat at his new kitchen island, alone, staring at a single bowl of soup he didn't eat. And all he could think was, they don't know who I am. That thought gripped him harder than any business loss ever had. Because it meant something else. They don't know I love them. And maybe he didn't deserve for them to. Not yet. But that didn't mean he wouldn't try. He opened his laptop, typed one line in a blank email draft. I saw them. He paused, deleted it, typed again. I'm not here to claim. I'm here to earn. He left it there. Didn't hit send. Just saved it, like a seed, waiting. Nancy knew he'd come. She felt it days before it happened. There was a different kind of weight in the air when old ghosts crept close. It was Saturday evening. The girls were asleep after building pillow forts in the living room. The dishes were done. The brownstone was dim and calm. Nancy stood by the fireplace, a book in one hand and her thoughts in the other when the knock came. 3 soft raps, not forceful, but deliberate. She didn't hesitate. She opened the door. And there he was, James, drenched from the rain, coat clinging to his frame, hair matted, chest rising and falling like someone trying to catch air after drowning. 4 years, he said. You counted? Every single day. She didn't step aside, didn't invite him in. He didn't ask. 3 girls. Yes. Mine? She raised an eyebrow. Do you really need to ask? He shook his head, eyes glassy, lips parted. He took a step closer, but she stayed still. Why didn't you tell me? He asked, voice barely above a whisper. You told me I was your mistake, she said. Why would I offer you a miracle? He winced, because truth, when thrown back at you, doesn't just sting, it brands. That night, he began. Don't, she interrupted. Don't explain it. Don't justify it. Don't wrap it in regret now that you see what you lost. He swallowed hard. I was scared. So was I. And I stayed. That silenced him. He looked past her, just for a moment. They look like you, he said softly. Nancy's voice dropped. They are me. Then, after a beat. But they're also you. I won't deny that. They ask about you sometimes. His eyes flickered. What do you tell them? That their father is a good man, just far away. That nearly dropped him to his knees. I didn't deserve that kindness. No, she agreed, but they did. He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a small silver locket. I brought this, for them. She didn't take it. You don't get to show up and play hero. I'm not trying to. I want to know them. Nancy stepped forward, standing so close their breath tangled in the air between them. They know joy. They know safety. They know love that doesn't leave. She leaned in. Can you promise that? James didn't answer, because promises were easy to make when you weren't staring at the proof of the last one you broke. After a long silence, Nancy softened, just slightly. You want to know them? She said, yes. Then understand this. You are not here to rewrite history. You are here to earn trust, slowly, with humility, no headlines, no drama. I'm not that man anymore, he said. Good. Because I don't need that man. And neither do they. He nodded. Not in victory. In surrender. Will you let me try? She hesitated. Then, the back porch. Tomorrow at 5. Bring crayons, not flowers. And she shut the door. Gently. Not as a dismissal, but as a beginning. A cautious one. A painful one, but a beginning nonetheless. The next day brought rain again. Not a storm. Just a slow, steady drizzle. The kind that coats everything in memory. James arrived 5 minutes early. Umbrella in one hand. Crayons and coloring books in the other. He wore a navy sweater this time. No tie. No watch. Like he was trying to shed the armor of who he'd been. Nancy met him at the back porch, wrapped in a knit cardigan, her face calm but unreadable. The girls were inside, napping. The porch lights glowed soft and gold. You look, he started. Tired? She offered. No. Powerful. She didn't smile. Don't flatter me. It dilutes the truth. He exhaled. I don't know how to talk to you anymore. Then don't talk. Just listen. And for the first time in his life, James listened. Nancy sat across from him, her legs crossed, mug in hand. She stared straight ahead as she spoke. I used to pray for you. Even after you broke me. Nancy. No, just hear it. I need to say it. He nodded. I used to cry in the shower so you wouldn't hear. I used to schedule my doctor appointments around your meetings because I thought if I could just be less inconvenient, maybe you'd stay. James's hands clenched around the umbrella. Rain tapped the railings like a ticking clock. I gave up my body for love, my pride, my youth, all of it. And when I couldn't give you what you wanted on your timeline, you folded me up and filed me under failure. That's not what You said I was your mistake. Her voice didn't shake, but his soul did. And when I found out I was pregnant, I didn't feel joy. I felt panic, because I knew if I told you, they'd never be mine again. You'd turn them into symbols, weapons, photos for boardroom walls. He stood suddenly, fists clenched. I would never. You did it to me, James. Why wouldn't I believe you do it to them? The silence that followed was thick and sharp. He turned away, rain soaking into his collar. I didn't come to fight, he muttered. But you came with expectations. She rose slowly, walked to him, stopped just inches from his back, then, gently, placed her hand on his wrist. He flinched, but didn't pull away. You said you don't know how to talk to me, she whispered. Let me teach you. Step 1, stop showing up to win. This isn't a negotiation, it's a home. He turned to face her, eyes wet, but not from the rain. I never stopped loving you. Her jaw clenched. Then why did you stop showing it? He didn't have an answer. Only breath. Only pain. From inside, a little voice called out, Mommy? Nancy turned, stepping back, releasing his wrist. Stay out here, she said. I'll bring them to you. One at a time. Why not all 3? Because you'll overwhelm them. And frankly, you still overwhelm me. She didn't say it cruelly, just honestly, and he accepted it. Minutes later, the door opened. Nancy stepped out, holding Ivy's hand. The little girl looked up at James with a mix of wonder and caution. Nancy knelt beside her. Ivy, this is a friend of Mommy's. His name is James. He wanted to color with you. Ivy looked at her mother, then at the man, then back again. Will you be here too, Mommy? Of course. Only then did she release Nancy's hand and walk toward James, shyly taking the coloring book from his lap. James crouched. "Hi, Ivy." She blinked, then pointed at his face. "You have my nose." He smiled, cracked open, wounded, joyful. "I guess I do." Nancy watched from the porch steps, arms folded, heart trembling. 1 down, 2 to go, and miles left before forgiveness. It was nearly sunset by the time all 3 girls had taken turns coloring with James. They didn't know who he was, not exactly, but they warmed to him. Especially Ivy, who sat in his lap and tried to teach him how to draw. Hearts the way she did. 2 loops and a crooked line down the middle. He pretended he couldn't do it. She giggled and fixed it for him. Nancy watched the entire interaction in silence. The porch lights flicked on. The breeze cooled, and the weight in her chest only grew heavier. Later, after the girls had gone inside, Nancy poured 2 glasses of water and handed one to James. He took it, unsure whether to sit or stand. "They're brilliant," he said quietly. "I know. And kind, also true. And strong. They had to be." She didn't say it to jab. She said it as fact. Because strength wasn't just genetic. It was taught. They stood under the porch eaves, rain still whispering around them. James looked at her, more vulnerable than she had ever seen him. "I want to be part of their lives." "I know. Really part. I know that too. So what happens now?" Nancy didn't answer immediately. She looked up at the sky, then back at him. "They think their father is a traveler," she said. "A good man. A quiet hero who sends them love from afar." James exhaled. "You told them that?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because I needed them to believe in someone, even when you gave me nothing to work with." He swallowed hard. "You didn't owe me that grace. I didn't give it for you. I gave it for them." The silence between them pulsed. "They believe in you," she said, "even though they don't know who you are yet." She stepped closer, eyes sharp, voice firm. "Don't ruin that." James blinked. "You think I will?" "I think you could." She took another step, nose inches from his. "You don't get to waltz in, shower them in gifts, win their affection, then disappear when it gets hard. That's not who I am anymore. Prove it." She pulled a folded piece of paper from her sweater pocket, held it out. He took it, unfolded it. Inside was a schedule: ballet rehearsals, school drop-offs, reading hours, dentist appointments. "Start here," she said. "No grand gestures, no overstepping. What do I tell them? You're a friend, a helper, someone who cares. And when do I get to tell them the truth?" Nancy's face softened, but her eyes stayed guarded. "When they're ready, not when you are." He nodded, folded the paper again with trembling hands. "Can I ask something?" "You already are. Do you hate me?" She hesitated, looked down at her fingers, then back into his face. "I hated who you became. I hated who I became with you." Then she added more quietly, "But I don't hate you now." James didn't expect that, didn't know what to do with it, so he held it like glass. Carefully. "I won't ruin them," he said. "Then don't ruin yourself either." She turned to go inside, paused in the doorway. "One more thing, anything. If you ever break their hearts, you won't need a lawyer. You'll come for me?" "No." She glanced at him over her shoulder. "They will." The brownstone was quiet. The girls were asleep upstairs, their soft breathing drifting into the warm hush of the living room. Nancy sat by the fireplace, legs tucked beneath her, a thin silk robe tied loosely at the waist. The fire crackled, casting flickers of gold across her skin. She wasn't expecting him to come back that night, but she knew he would, and when the knock came, just one soft uncertain, she didn't flinch. She opened the door. There was James. No umbrella, no coat. Just him, soaked again, rain in his lashes. "I didn't know where else to go," he said. "You could have gone anywhere." "No, only here felt real." She didn't speak again, just stepped aside. Let him in, closed the door behind them both. He stood in the living room, clothes clinging to him, hair damp, eyes flicking toward the firelight and the familiar shadows on her face. She handed him a towel without a word. He took it, rubbed the back of his neck. Still silence, but not cold, heavy, like everything they hadn't said for 4 years had shown up first and was waiting on the sofa between them. Nancy turned and walked to the fire. He followed, slowly. She didn't sit. She just stared into the flames. "Do you remember the Gotham Tower?" He nodded. "Every detail." She turned her head. "Even the window ledge?" "Especially the window ledge." Her robe shifted slightly as she stepped toward him. One tie, one tug. It opened, and time dissolved. James didn't move forward, not right away. He looked at her like he was seeing the moon for the first time, familiar and unreachable all at once. "This isn't forgiveness," she whispered. "I know, and it's not closure. I wouldn't want that either." She reached for him, fingers curling into his shirt, still damp and cool from the rain. "Then what is this?" He leaned in, forehead against hers. "Punishment." She kissed him, hard, like years of rage and desire were battling on her tongue. He kissed back, not gently, not carefully, but like a man drowning in what he once threw away. She pushed him against the wall, tore the shirt open, buttons scattered across the hardwood. He groaned when her teeth grazed his collarbone. She gasped when he grabbed her hips and pinned her there, breath hot against her ear. "Tell me you still hate me," he growled. "I hate that I don't," she whispered back. He lifted her, carried her to the rug. The fire beside them danced and popped. Their bodies collided with the rhythm of unfinished business. No music, no sweet talk, just skin on skin, scar on scar. She scraped her nails down his back. He bit her shoulder. She pulled his hair. He gripped her thighs until she moaned into the flames. This wasn't gentle. It wasn't romantic. It was raw. Two people burning down a house they once called home because the wreckage still smelled like them. When he sank inside her, she arched like she'd forgotten how full she used to feel. When she came, she didn't scream. She sobbed. Quiet, shaking, fingertips clinging to his ribs like a prayer. Afterward, she lay on her back, chest rising, hand pressed to her lips like she couldn't believe what just happened. James lay beside her, staring at the ceiling. "This doesn't fix anything," she murmured. "I don't want to fix. What do you want?" He turned to her. A chance, one that doesn't come wrapped in guilt. She didn't respond, didn't promise, but she didn't leave the rug either, and neither did he. Morning arrived gently. Sunlight crawled across the hardwood floor, slipping between curtain slits and warming. The edges of the rug where they lay tangled, half covered, half exposed, all unspoken. Nancy opened her eyes first. She didn't move. James was asleep beside her, chest rising and falling in quiet rhythm, one hand loosely curled near. Her hip, like his body, still needed to be touching hers, even if his mind had drifted far away. She studied him. He looked younger when he slept, not like the man who used to speak in ledgers and lineage, but like the one who once danced with her barefoot in their old kitchen, flower on his cheek, telling her she was all he needed. She brushed a strand of hair from his forehead, then stood. She didn't cover herself right away. She didn't hide. She let the morning light kiss the scars, physical and otherwise, and walked into the kitchen. James stirred moments later. He sat up, groggy, dazed, pulling the blanket around his waist as he looked around. And then he remembered. All of it. Nancy. She didn't turn. Coffee or tea? Coffee. Black? Still. She poured 2 cups, placed his on the counter without a word. He stepped forward, careful, unsure if the floor beneath him was still solid. "Last night was a choice," she said, cutting him off. "Not a promise. I wasn't going to assume." She finally looked at him. Eyes clear, posture steady. "Good, because I meant what I said." She sipped her coffee. That wasn't forgiveness. That wasn't a doorway back in. "I'm not looking for shortcuts." She leaned against the counter. "So what are you looking for, James?" He set the mug down. "Something real." "Even if it hurts." She nodded. "Then you're in the right place." They sat in silence for a few minutes. Not awkward, just aware. The kitchen clock ticked softly. The radiator hummed beneath the floorboards. Then Nancy broke the quiet. "The girls need consistency. You need to earn routine, not rush it. I understand. You will come by on schedule. You will not interfere with how I raise them. And you will not make promises you can't keep." Agreed. "And if you ever confuse my body for my heart again." She let the warning hang. He nodded. "It won't happen unless you want it to." She gave him a look. "My wonderful family. Let's take a quick pause right here. If you're still with me, type "still watching with you, Dr. Phillips" in the comments. I want to feel your presence. Don't just sit back quietly. Your voice gives life to this story. Hit that like button if this part has already touched your heart. And if you renew, kindly subscribe so you can stay connected to every unfolding moment. Share this video with someone who needs to feel love's strength today. Don't get comfortable. I wouldn't dare. But he smiled just slightly, because despite her steel, there was softness hiding underneath. The fact that she let him stay the night, that was something. Not forgiveness, but access to rebuild from the ground up. Later that morning, as James tied his shoes near the front door, Ivy patted down the stairs. She rubbed her eyes, still in her pajamas. "You're still here," she said, surprised. He looked up. "I am. Did you sleep over?" Nancy walked over quickly, kneeling. "He just came early today, baby." Ivy tilted her head. "Will you come back tomorrow?" James looked at Nancy. She nodded. "If your mom says it's okay," he replied. Ivy smiled. "Okay. But next time bring pancakes." Nancy choked back a laugh. James grinned. "I'll do my best." As the door closed behind him, Nancy leaned against it for a moment, heart beating louder than she'd admit. She didn't know where this would lead, didn't know if love could be revived after what it had survived. But she knew this. She was in control now, and if he wanted a place in her world, he'd have to keep earning it. Every single day. That night, the brownstone was quiet again. But this time, the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt suspended, like the air between two people who had spoken every hard truth and now had nothing left but what their bodies could say. Nancy stood barefoot in the hallway, robe tied again at the waist, hair damp from a hot bath. James was still downstairs. She found him on the living room floor. Same rug, same firelight, knees bent, back against the couch, hands resting loosely between his legs. "I didn't know if you'd come down," he said, not looking at her. "I wasn't sure either." She walked past him, toward the fireplace. He watched the sway of her silhouette in the glow, the way her robe clung to the curves he once memorized in the dark. "I was thinking about the first time," he said softly. "The Gotham Tower." She didn't turn. "I was thinking about the second." He stood, slowly, walked toward her. "The one where I ruined everything? The one where you said I was your mistake." That made him pause behind her. "I've thought about those words every single night," he admitted. "Not because they were true, but because they were cruel." Nancy turned to face him. "And yet you still said them, because I thought love was only worth something if it looked like legacy. And now," he stepped closer, "now I know love doesn't need a name to matter. It just needs to be chosen." She stared at him for a long time, then untied her robe. Again, let it fall to the floor. Again, not out of seduction, out of choice. "Then don't speak," she said. "Choose me now, here, without needing to own me." James nodded and stepped forward. He kissed her slowly this time, not like a man possessed, like a man learning a language he once forgot. His hands didn't grope. They traced her neck, her shoulders, her ribs. She closed her eyes and let him rediscover what had never belonged to him, but what had always welcomed him. He lowered her to the rug. Same one, same heat, but this time, no war in their touch, no resentment in their rhythm, just presence. She gasped when he sank into her again, not from surprise, from remembrance. She arched. He held her hips, steady. They moved like people who weren't chasing climax, but connection. His lips brushed her collarbone. Her fingers tangled in his hair. "Don't stop," she whispered. "Never again," he replied. And they stayed like that, bodies speaking truths their mouths weren't ready to say. When she came, she trembled beneath him, whispering his name like it didn't hurt anymore. When he followed, it was with a groan that sounded like surrender. Afterward, she lay in his arms. Neither of them said anything, because nothing needed to be defined. Not yet. Maybe not ever. They had shared pain, shared fury, shared breath. Now they shared stillness. And sometimes that's the first step toward something real. Not the finish line, just a beginning. Soft shadows curled at the edges of the bedroom like whispers not ready to be heard. Nancy stirred beneath the sheets, one hand reaching across the bed instinctively. Empty. James was gone. Not the dramatic kind of gone. No slammed door, No vanishing act. Just quiet. Still. She sat up slowly, blanket sliding down her shoulder, revealing the curve of her bare back kissed pink from firelight and memory. The space beside her was still warm, which meant he hadn't left long ago. And then she saw it, folded in half, placed gently on the pillow where he'd slept. A note, just one line, written in his handwriting. "I'll be back. Not to steal your peace, but to earn it." Nancy held the paper in both hands, not like a love letter, like something sacred. Because, for once, James didn't leave a demand. He left a decision. Hers, entirely. Downstairs, the girls were beginning to stir. She tucked the note into the drawer beside her bed, slipped into a robe, and moved toward the kitchen. Pancakes this morning, because Ivy had asked, and because routine was what anchored this little universe she'd built. She cracked eggs into a bowl and smiled softly when she caught her reflection in the kitchen window. There was a glow, not from him, but from her, because surviving love and still being willing to feel again, that was its own kind of miracle. Midway through flipping the second pancake, Noelle came padding in, hair wild, mismatched socks. "Mommy," she mumbled, rubbing her eyes. "Was someone here last night?" Nancy's grip on the spatula paused. "What makes you ask?" "I thought I heard voices. Happy ones." Nancy turned, crouched, and held her daughter's little cheeks in both hands. "Yes, baby. Someone who missed us very much. Will he come back?" Nancy kissed her forehead. "If he does, it'll be because he's ready, and because we say yes." Noelle blinked. "Okay." Then she smiled. "Do we still get pancakes?" Nancy laughed. "You'll get double if you set the table." By the time the girls were all downstairs, music played softly on the radio, syrup was warming on. The stove and laughter began to fill the corners of the house that used to echo with silence. Nancy didn't rush to text James. She didn't need to. He'd done something bigger than call. He'd shown up. And then, even more powerfully, he stepped away. That note, it stayed in her drawer, not as proof of anything, but as a reminder that real love doesn't bang the door down. It knocks, then waits. The next morning he showed up at 7:03 a.m. No knocking, just waiting quietly on the front steps with a small bag in one hand and nervous energy in the other. Nancy opened the door in sweatpants and a faded tee. No makeup, no armor. She didn't speak, just tilted her head toward the living room. James stepped in. "I didn't want to wake them," he said softly. "They're already up. Saturday cartoons." He followed her voice down the hallway and into a scene that made his throat tighten. 3 girls on the floor in a sea of plush toys and cereal crumbs. Noelle looked up first. "You came back." He nodded, kneeling down. "Told you I would." "What's in the bag?" He pulled out 3 boxes. Inside, a coloring book for each of them, hand-labeled with their names. "I don't know what you like, so I brought everything." Ivy opened hers and gasped. "Unicorns." Isolde grinned. "I got ballet dancers." Noelle beamed. "Mine has astronauts." Nancy stood back, arms folded, watching, measuring. After 20 minutes of floor time, Ivy tugged at his sleeve. "Can you braid?" James looked at Nancy. She smirked. "This'll be fun." He took a deep breath. "Teach me." Nancy walked over, handed him a brush and 3 hair ties. "Wide tooth first. Start from the bottom. Work your way up." He nodded like she was giving military instructions, which in a way she was. He sat behind Ivy and began gently. 1 knot, 1 tangle. "Ow. Sorry. Nancy knelt beside him. "Like this." She guided his hands. Their fingers brushed. He didn't look up, but she felt the shift. This was a man not trying to impress her, but trying to learn for them. That mattered. By the time he finished Ivy's braid, lumpy, slightly crooked, she hugged him, tight, without prompting. He nearly cried, but blinked it back. "That was perfect," Ivy said. "No, it wasn't," he replied. "Still perfect." Afterward, they all sat down for a late breakfast. No suits, no speeches, just waffles and giggles and milk spills. James didn't take out his phone once, didn't look distracted. He passed syrup bottles. He wiped crumbs. He poured second helpings. Nancy watched all of it, quietly, not because she needed him to be perfect, but because, for the first time, he wasn't performing. Later, when the girls ran off to play, James stayed back to help clear the dishes. Nancy handed him a towel. You survived braid duty. Barely. Next lesson, matching socks. He grinned. Advanced level? Elite. They stood there, washing and drying, like it was normal, like it had always been this way, until he turned to her and said, "Thank you." She raised an eyebrow. For what? For letting me try without making me beg. She looked down at the plate in her hand, then handed it to him. Just remember, trying isn't the same as staying. He nodded. That's the plan. Mondays used to mean very little to James Adam. Now, they meant hair ties and forgotten lunchboxes. He didn't ask to move in, didn't push for custody, didn't even ask to stay for dinner most nights. Instead, he picked them up from school on Wednesdays, per Nancy's trial schedule. He kept a car seat in the back of his SUV. He learned their favorite songs. He messed them up every time. But they laughed. Harder each week. Noelle started leaving drawings in his glove compartment. Ivy made him promise to stop using his phone while she told knock-knock jokes. Isolde began calling him James the Just, like a knight in her favorite bedtime storybook. He didn't ask them to call him Dad. He didn't need to. Nancy watched it all from a careful distance. She saw how he never missed ballet, how he learned Ivy's bedtime snack routine, how he listened, really listened. When Noelle talked about her imaginary friend, Captain Lollipop, he didn't try to fix things. He just stayed present. And presence, for once, didn't feel like intrusion. It felt earned. One Thursday night, as she tucked the girls into bed, Isolde asked, "Can he come to our recital next month?" Nancy smoothed the blanket over her chest. "Who?" "James." Nancy smiled. "You'd like that?" He claps the loudest. She chuckled. Yes, he does." That weekend, she found him outside the brownstone, sitting on the porch steps after dropping off a book Ivy had left in his car. No fanfare, no pretext, just him. She opened the door. "Forgot your way back down the steps?" He smirked. "Honestly, I was just sitting here hoping I earned a glass of water." She stepped aside. Hope works better with hydration. He followed her inside. They ended up in the kitchen again. Same place, new air. He leaned against the counter. "I know this doesn't erase the past. Nothing can, but I want to be part of the future." She stirred sugar into her tea. "Are you asking permission?" "No. I'm asking for opportunity." She turned, faced him. No makeup, no defenses. This family doesn't run on declarations anymore. What does it run on? Consistency and pancakes, mostly pancakes. He smiled. "I'll start practicing." She stepped forward, stopped inches from him. "You can't rebuild what we had. I don't want what we had." "Then what do you want?" He didn't hesitate. "I want something better, and I'm willing to work for it every day." She studied him. Every scar, every shadow. Then she stepped around him, rinsed her cup, and said, "We'll see." But when he left that night, she watched him from the window. And when she turned away, she was still smiling. James had never stepped into a public library without a purpose. Before now, libraries meant investment reports, rare manuscripts, speeches for press tours. But this was different. This was Ivy's place. He arrived 10 minutes early. Checked the children's section for the beanbag corner Nancy had described. Bright colors, floor puzzles, books that squeaked. He stood awkwardly between a toddler reading about talking vegetables and a bored teenager reshelving books alphabetically. Then Ivy walked in, pigtails swinging, purple sneakers lighting up with every step. She stopped when she saw him. "You made it. Wouldn't miss it." She held out a little pink card. "I have my own library card now. Let me guess, you memorized the number already?" "Obviously." He laughed and took her hand. Together, they walked to the big girl reading section. Ivy picked a thick hardcover with glitter on the cover. James picked one with dragons. They sat on the floor, crisscross applesauce, and took turns reading chapters, acting out the funny voices. She corrected his dragon growl. He corrected her pronunciation of magnificent. Every Saturday, one-on-one. A different daughter, different place. With Ivy, it was the library. With Noelle, the farmer's market. She loved to ask vendors how apples got their names. James didn't know, but he made up stories that made her laugh so hard Juice came out of her nose once. They never let him forget it. And Isolde? She chose the playground. Not to climb, not to swing, but to sit in the sandbox with her sketch pad and draw families that didn't always match. "This is you," she said once, pointing at a stick figure with a cape and messy hair. "Why the cape?" "Because you fly in and out." He flinched. "Do you want me to stop?" She shrugged. "I want you to stay longer, but I like when you come at all." That stuck, more than any boardroom victory ever had. Back at the brownstone, Nancy watched it all unfold. From the windows, from the top of the stairs, from the porch where she sometimes stood with a cup of tea and a storm of thoughts she didn't dare say aloud. James was doing what he said. He was earning, and for the first time, he wasn't trying to win her. He was trying to know them. That mattered more than flowers or apologies ever could. One afternoon, after the library, Ivy burst through the door and shouted, "Mommy!" He learned how to do piggyback rides without getting winded. Nancy raised an eyebrow at James. He leaned in and whispered, "Almost pulled my back." But totally worth it. That night, while folding laundry, Nancy paused to pick up Ivy's drawing. 4 figures, 3 girls, 1 tall man with a tie, a braid in his hand, and a crooked smile. She turned it over. Ivy had written, "My James." Not Dad, not Mr. Adam, just my James. Nancy pressed the paper to her chest, then tucked it away in the drawer with the note. The one he left that morning after the firelight in silk. The one that started all of this. The first time James saw Noelle in her ballet outfit, he forgot how to breathe. Tiny leotard, pale pink tights, ribbon-tied shoes that looked far too delicate for a world this harsh. She stood in front of the mirror, adjusting her bun, fierce concentration on her brow. "I can't get the loop right." James knelt behind her. "Let me try." He hadn't touched a hairbrush since Nancy left, but his fingers were steady, careful. She watched him in the mirror, silent. When he was done, the bun wasn't perfect, but it stayed. "Thanks," she said. "Mom's usually better, but this'll do." He smiled. That was enough. He waited outside the dance studio, pacing the corridor. Other parents scrolled their phones. James paced like the world depended on the next pirouette. When the music stopped, Noelle walked out, sweaty, proud. She held out her hand. "Want to see my new move?" Right there in the parking lot, she twirled. 2 steps, a stumble, a laugh. "You were watching?" "Every second." She looked up. "Then you saw when I fell, and I saw when you got back up. That's the part I'll remember." Meanwhile, Isolde had fallen asleep next to Nancy with one of her books. Illustrations of stars and planets scattered across the comforter. She'd started calling Nancy's room the moon station because of the white curtains and floating lamp. "Do you think Daddy likes space stuff too?" she had asked once. Nancy paused. "He used to collect star charts. Why?" "Just wondering if he remembers." That night, James brought over an old telescope from storage, scratched, rusted at the knobs, but he polished it, cleaned the lenses, and set it up by her window. When Isolde woke up and saw it, she shrieked, "Is it real?" "Every bit of it." He showed her how to track the craters of the moon, pointed out Saturn's rings. She sat on his lap, sleepy eyes wide. "I guess you do remember." James didn't answer. He was too busy trying not to cry. Bedtime routines became sacred. No screens, no phones, just stories, brushes, and soft lullabies Nancy hadn't sung since before the court orders. One night, as Nancy hummed and folded blankets, she heard something from down the hallway. James's voice, singing, off-key, hesitant, but earnest. She peeked. He was in Ivy's room, sitting on the edge of her bed, her arms around his neck, her cheek against his chest. No cameras, no stage, just her father, singing her to sleep. Nancy closed the door quietly, then leaned against the wall, hands trembling. She hadn't realized how much she needed that sound. Outside, New York moved fast. Inside the brownstone, time slowed. Ballet shoes by the door, star maps on the wall, lullabies in the air, and a woman in the hallway realizing James wasn't just present, he was healing. Not just himself, but the girls, and slowly, her. The hallway was dim that night, and the quiet had a heartbeat. Nancy stood by her bedroom door, fingers resting on the knob, listening to 3 soft breaths coming from the girls' room. The triplets had fallen asleep fast. Noel clutched her ballet shoes like a teddy bear. Isolde had rolled into Ivy's side, the blanket pushed halfway off them both. James was in the guest room again. The door between them and him was always closed. But that night, Nancy didn't lock hers. James lay awake, eyes on the ceiling, heart louder than reason. He heard the softest click from across the hall. Not a creak, not a knock, just absence. The absence of a lock, and that said more than words ever could. He rose, carefully, slowly, as if the floor might judge him. Nancy had slipped into her silk robe, white, like memory, like surrender. She was brushing her hair out, long, slow strokes, when the door opened just a little. She didn't turn, didn't speak. But she didn't close it either, and that was enough. James stepped inside. Their eyes met in the mirror. Something cracked between them, soft and sacred. He walked toward her, one step at a time. She set the brush down. The air was heavy with things unsaid, but neither of them ran from it. Not tonight. I wasn't sure you'd come, she whispered. I almost didn't, he replied. He reached for the tie of her robe, paused. May I? She nodded once, eyes never leaving his. He loosened the knot, slow and reverent, like unwrapping forgiveness. The robe fell to her elbows. And Nancy didn't hide. They didn't rush. No ripping clothes or heated gasps. Just fingers learning old maps again. A kiss on her shoulder. A hand on his chest. Their bodies whispered before their mouths ever did. When he kissed her, she trembled, but didn't pull away. They moved to the bed like a prayer being said. No lights, just shadows and memory. Her legs curled around his hips, guiding him. His lips traced the outline of her hip bone, reverent, deliberate. I never stopped loving you, she murmured. Then why did we let everything go cold? His voice cracked like dry leaves. Because we thought love wasn't enough, she whispered, pulling him closer. But it is, if we let it be. That night their bodies spoke the truth. Slow, raw, unrushed. James kissed the space between her breasts, the hollow of her throat, the inside of her wrists. Nancy gasped when he whispered her name against her skin like a vow. When he finally entered her, it wasn't about lust. It was about coming home. Afterwards he lay beside her, chest rising under her cheek, her fingers drawing circles on his skin. Was this a mistake? He asked. She shook her head. It was overdue. In the hallway, Ivy stirred, sat up in bed, listened. She saw the guest room door was wide open, saw the faint golden light from her mother's room. She didn't go to the door. She just smiled into the dark. Stay, Daddy, she whispered, like a spell. And in the next room, he did. The gala shimmered with chandeliers and champagne flutes, designer gowns gliding past men in satin-lapelled tuxedos. But none of it dazzled more than the three girls running through the red-carpeted lobby, giggling, twirling, barefoot beneath their puffy tulle skirts. Nancy was breathless, her hands full of velvet hairbands and a misplaced pink shoe. James, beside her, straightened his cuffs and glanced down the grand staircase. Are you sure they're ready for this? He asked softly. Nancy gave him a look. They were born ready. We're the ones still catching up. Inside the ballroom, camera shutters clicked like applause. Everyone wanted a photo with the CEO who had returned to New York with triplets. Whispers floated like perfume. That's his ex-wife? I thought she was Barren. Are those really his daughters? The air prickled with speculation, envy, and something worse, pity dressed up in curiosity. James stood tall, his hand resting gently on Nancy's lower back. She didn't flinch this time. The girls danced in circles around them, their laughter scattering the tension. But then, a photographer knelt, aiming his camera at the trio. Girls, can you look here, please? Ivy froze. She turned to James, lifted both arms in the air and cried, Daddy, pick me up! Silence, all around them. The entire room seemed to pause. The string quartet faltered. The lights above the stage dimmed. And in that breathless stillness, James knelt, scooped Ivy into his arms, then turned to Noel and Isolde and opened his arms again. Come here, angels. They rushed in, clambering over his tailored suit, giggling into his neck, planting kisses on his cheeks. The flashbulbs went wild. Nancy brought a hand to her chest, blinking back tears, not for the cameras, not for the attention, but for the sight in front of her. This was her family. Hold still, just one more. The photographer adjusted his lens, but he didn't need to direct them, because the perfect photo had already happened. James stood in the center, one girl on each hip, one wrapped around his neck like a scarf of pure love. His eyes were closed, his smile unguarded. Nancy stood beside them, her hand brushing Ivy's back, her cheek pressed against James's arm. The world disappeared, and for once, they didn't care who was watching. Later, James whispered as they stepped aside, "They never called me that in public before." Nancy smiled. "They never had a reason to believe you'd stay before." He looked at her. "I'm staying, Nancy." She didn't respond, not with words, just slipped her hand into his and held it tightly. Across the room, a woman in silver sequins narrowed her eyes. She reached for her phone and zoomed in on the photo she'd just taken. Her lips curled into something cold. James didn't see her, but soon the past would. The gala should have ended with champagne bubbles and laughter echoing into the night. It should have closed on a picture-perfect note, the CEO with his daughters in his arms, his ex-wife glowing beside him. But stories like this never end quietly. Not when secrets are lurking behind flashing cameras. James had just returned from escorting the girls upstairs, each one kissing his cheek and whispering that he smelled like cinnamon and dreams. Nancy remained behind, sipping sparkling water by the floral arch, waving at the guests now drifting toward the exit. And that's when it happened. A subtle click, not the camera kind, but the kind that seals fate. The photographer, the same man who had snapped the beautiful family shot, tilted his head, examining his device. Not the camera, a tiny audio transmitter buried in his lapel. From his phone, he tapped into the stream. Static, then a voice. "Got it. She's not Barren." She lied. Another voice laughed. Guess that alimony case about irreparable infertility was a bluff after all. The photographer froze. He knew what he had just stumbled on, and he knew what it was worth. In a suite high above the city, James kissed each girl good night. Ivy had refused to sleep without her tiara. Isolde had stuffed gala napkins under her pillow for memory dreams, she said. And Noelle had whispered, "Daddy, don't ever let go again." "I won't," James promised. But downstairs, fate had already reached for the thread. Nancy was leaning against the ballroom rail when James returned. Her dress caught the soft amber lights, casting faint glimmers against the marble. "They asleep?" she asked. Tucked in and snoring. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Someone's been watching us tonight," she murmured. James followed her gaze to the corner, and there she was, Veronique, James's former attorney and one-time friend to his second wife. She stood still, her phone angled just slightly, eyes locked on Nancy. "She's not here for cocktails," Nancy whispered. James nodded. "No, she's here for leverage." Nancy looked at him. "We filed everything clean." James exhaled. "Doesn't mean someone didn't bury something." Just then, his phone buzzed. An anonymous number. He opened the message. Photo attachment, James cradling the girls. Nancy's hand around his wrist. Smiles all around. Caption, "The barren wife. Looks fertile now." Below it, "This goes live at midnight, unless we talk." Nancy saw it. Her fingers trembled, but her jaw locked in place. "So this is how they'll try to ruin us." James put a hand over hers. "Not if I ruin the game first." Downstairs, the photographer was already transferring files to a secure drive. Veronique met him behind the curtained hallway near the servers. "You have it?" she asked, voice crisp. "Audio and photos," he confirmed. "All admissible. Infertility fraud is juicy." Veronique slid an envelope across the small table, but just before he reached for it, a tap landed on his shoulder. Security. James had anticipated it. Nancy had coordinated it. And the hotel had the whole exchange under surveillance. "We're going public, on our terms," James growled, storming into the suite minutes later. Nancy stood by the window, arms crossed, heart racing. "Do we tell them everything?" "Only the truth. Our truth." He paused. "Nancy, did you really file Barren on that form?" "Because I was. Back then, I had every doctor's note to prove it." She turned to him, voice suddenly shaking. "And then, the miracle happened. 3 miracles. But I didn't go back to update a legal record because I didn't think anyone cared. James stepped forward, slowly. I care. Not about the forms. Not about Veronique. Not about scandals. He took her hands in his. I care about Ivy, Isolde, Noelle, and you. Her eyes widened. We go live in 1 hour, he whispered. And we show the world what healing looks like. Later that night, midnight, a soft piano tune opened the live stream. James appeared on screen first. Then Nancy stepped into frame. They were seated beside each other. No glam. No filters. Just clarity. A decade ago, a diagnosis told us something was impossible, James began. And then life reminded us that impossibility is sometimes just delayed hope, Nancy added. They held up the photo, the one Veronique planned to weaponize. But instead of shame, it radiated triumph. These are our daughters, and if anyone has a problem with that— James paused. They should take it up with love, Nancy finished. The comments exploded with support. This is what real family looks like. Who cares about forms? Those girls are joy personified. Respect to them for owning the moment. Veronique never sent another text. The photographer was removed from the press list permanently. And Nancy? She tucked the photo into a gold-rimmed frame and placed it on her bedside table. For once, she could sleep without checking over her shoulder. Morning sunlight flooded the penthouse with gentle warmth. It slipped through floor-to-ceiling windows and spilled across cream-colored couches, over a plush rug scattered with tiaras, gala shoes, and half-eaten gummy bears. Nancy stood at the kitchen island, barefoot in one of James's oversized shirts, watching the coffee brew. Behind her, laughter erupted, the kind that only children could manufacture from absolutely nothing. Ivy had fashioned a crown out of golden ribbon. Isolde was dragging a suitcase across the floor, pretending to board a plane. And Noelle? She had taken James's phone and was trying to FaceTime the doorman. James appeared, shirtless and sleepy-eyed, rubbing a towel through his hair. They've been up since 6, Nancy said, sliding a mug toward him. So much for retirement. He smirked, sipping. Then Ivy looked up. Daddy, can we do the photo again? He blinked. The one from the party? No, she giggled. The real one. Noelle joined in. The one where we all wear jammies. Isolde tugged at his arm. And you and Mommy sit on the couch and don't move. James turned to Nancy. Guess we've been summoned. Minutes later, the 5 of them were squished on the living room sofa. Ivy on his lap, Isolde clinging to Nancy's side, Noelle curled between them. Nancy set the phone camera on the timer, propped it on a book stack, and hit record. James wrapped his arm around her shoulders and leaned into her, breathing her in. 10 seconds of chaos. 4 heads turning in different directions. Giggles. A sneeze. And then, just before the shutter snapped, stillness. A moment so natural, it didn't need staging. Nancy glanced at the screen. Her breath caught. There it was. A photo that wasn't posed, wasn't polished, but was perfect. Later, as James scrolled through the images, his thumb slowed over one in particular. The kids were looking in different directions. Nancy was laughing. His head was turned, lips just shy of her temple. And even without everyone smiling, they looked like they belonged. He held up the phone. We look like a family. Nancy didn't respond right away. She just looked at the image, and then at him. That's because we are— James nodded, then tapped his screen. I'm printing this. Nancy raised a brow. To hang in your office? No, he said, voice low. To carry in my wallet. Her heart thudded once, heavy and sure. You still carry wallets? For this? I will. Midday brought a knock at the door. A courier delivered a small envelope, James's name etched in ink too familiar to ignore. Nancy watched from across the room as he opened it. Inside, a single sheet. Handwritten. It was from his mother. Saw the photo. They have your eyes. Tell her I'm ready to meet them. All 4 of them. Nancy looked up, startled, as James exhaled hard. She never wrote me anything that wasn't typed, he muttered. Is this real? Nancy whispered. She's extending a branch. After all these years? He looked at Nancy. After them. That evening, the photo from the gala was everywhere. Trending. Viral. Talk shows debated it. Blogs tried to guess how Nancy conceived. Online forums were filled with fertility doctors defending miracles. But Nancy didn't care about the noise. She cared about what the girls said as they got ready for bed. Ivy tugged her robe. "Mommy." "Yes, baby." "Can we take more pictures with Daddy tomorrow?" "Why?" "Because we look like a family in them." Nancy knelt and cupped her daughter's face. "That's because we are." Noelle peeked in. "Even when we're not dressed up?" Nancy laughed. "Especially then." James watched from the doorway. His heart, once guarded behind stone and contracts, now beat freely, filled with ribbons of love knotted through time and forgiveness. He stepped inside the room and knelt beside them. "Want to know a secret?" he whispered. The girls leaned in. "You made me someone I didn't think I could be." "What?" Ivy asked. He smiled. That night, after bedtime stories and tickle fights, James and Nancy stood in the hallway, silent, content. Nancy leaned into his chest. "This doesn't feel like pretend anymore." James kissed her forehead. "Because it's not." He paused. "I never thought I'd get another shot at family." She looked up. "You didn't." "What do you mean?" She placed his hand on her waist. "You didn't get it. You built it." And he knew then. This wasn't redemption. This was home. The city below pulsed with life. Honking taxis, glowing billboards, and the distant hum of jazz rising from a street corner cafe. But high above it all, James stood barefoot on the penthouse balcony, his hands gripping the cold railing, his thoughts miles away from the skyline. The moon cast a pale halo over his bare shoulders. His white shirt hung loose, unbuttoned, forgotten. Behind him, the world was quiet. The girls had long drifted to sleep, and Nancy had said she'd be just 5 minutes ago. But James knew better. She was giving him space, the kind he hadn't earned, the kind he didn't deserve. And yet, here she was, still here. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the photo, the one Ivy had demanded he print. The 5 of them on the couch, bed hair, pajamas, laughter frozen in time. He traced the edges of the paper with his thumb, then tucked it back into his wallet like a prayer. Behind him, the sliding door whispered open. Nancy, wrapped in a soft robe, her hair loose, her eyes still heavy from half-sleep. "Can't sleep?" she asked gently. He shook his head, not looking at her. "Too much noise up here," he said, tapping his temple. She padded barefoot across the balcony and stood beside him. "Talk to me." He hesitated. "I don't know if I ever knew how." Nancy rested her elbow on the rail and turned her face to the wind. "You know what I was thinking earlier?" He glanced at her. "What?" "That the man I hated died the night you held Ivy like she was oxygen." Silence. Then, "Nancy, I know who you were," she said, voice steady. "The man who pushed me away, who believed in boardrooms more than bedrooms, who said he loved me but couldn't stand to see me break each month with no baby in my arms." James closed his eyes. "I was afraid," he admitted. "Afraid I'd fail at fatherhood, that I'd fail you, that loving you wouldn't be enough if I couldn't give you what you wanted. So you left before you had to face the emptiness." "I ran," he nodded, "and hated myself for it." Nancy's hand found his. "But here we are. 3 girls and 1 man who looks like he's still holding his breath." "I am," he whispered. "Every day, I keep waiting to wake up, to find out it was a dream, that I never got you back, that those girls don't call me Daddy." "Then stop waiting," she said firmly. "Start living." A breeze swept between them. Cool. Cleansing. Nancy turned to face him, fully now. "Do you know what they told me at the clinic?" James looked down. "That you couldn't, that I shouldn't hope, but you did, even when it burned." She stepped closer. "And then one night, when I couldn't sleep, I got on my knees. I didn't ask for a miracle. I asked for peace." James's jaw clenched. "And you got 3? Nancy smiled softly. "No, I got 4. Her hand pressed against his chest. "Because you came back, and the man who once made me feel broken became the man who makes me feel whole." His breath caught. There were no walls left between them now. No sharp words. No locked doors. No unsaid regrets. Just James. And Nancy, and the weight of every second they'd wasted, finally shifting into something lighter. "I don't want to mess this up," he said quietly. "Then don't. I want to marry you again." She didn't flinch, didn't smile, didn't answer with words. She leaned in, took his face in her hands, and kissed him, slow, assured, hopeful. The city disappeared. The noise faded, and under a sky full of stars, a man who once shattered a heart found himself rebuilt by the same hands he'd once let go. The balcony had gone quiet. The city's rhythm faded beneath them, replaced by the kind of silence that carries weight, the kind where one wrong word might crack everything open again. Nancy stood there, arms crossed lightly over her robe, eyes locked on James. But it wasn't confrontation. It was a question she hadn't dared ask in years. He could feel it coming. James, do you still hate me? His brow furrowed instantly. What? You once looked at me like I was the reason you couldn't breathe. She didn't mean it with bitterness. She meant it with ache. James leaned back against the railing, exhaling slowly, as if she'd pierced a memory he'd buried deep. I never hated you, he said finally. Not once. You pushed me away. Because I hated me. Nancy's throat tightened. Then why didn't you say that? Because I was a coward. His voice cracked on the confession. I watched you suffer every month. The tests, the tears, the silent dinners. I wanted to fix it, and when I couldn't, I blamed the one person I loved most. He looked down, ashamed. You. Nancy's lips trembled, but she didn't interrupt. I thought if I let you go, you'd find peace without me. Maybe someone else would give you what I couldn't. He met her eyes. But all I gave you was silence. Nancy walked slowly toward him, her bare feet silent on the marble floor. The night I signed those papers, she said, I didn't cry. James swallowed. I thought I'd cry for hours, but I didn't. I felt numb. I told myself if I could survive losing you, I could survive anything. And did you? No, she said, her voice nearly a whisper. I just learned to live with the ache. She stopped in front of him, close enough for their breathing to sink. You looked at me like I was fragile, like loving me hurt you. Because it did, James whispered. Not because of you, but because every time I looked into your eyes, I saw what I couldn't give you. I saw a future you dreamed of, and I couldn't paint it with you. But I never needed you to paint it. She reached for his hand. I just needed you to stay. He flinched. So why are you still here now? Nancy's eyes welled. Because the man who left me died the moment you picked Ivy up without flinching. The man who stands before me now is someone who fought his way back. She touched his face. And I see him. Clearly. James blinked hard. I still carry guilt. I carry grace. What if I mess up again? Then we rebuild again. He looked down at their hands, intertwined, unshaken. Nancy, yes? Do you still hate me? She didn't answer. Instead, she stepped forward, closing the final inch between them, and rested her forehead against his. I hated the pain. I hated the silence. I hated the nights I reached across the bed and touched cold sheets. James exhaled deeply. But I never hated you, not even when I should have. Why? She smiled, soft and sure. Because somewhere inside, I always knew you'd find your way back to me. I just didn't expect to find 3 little girls standing beside you when you did. He laughed through a cracked voice. They saved me. They saved us. A long beat passed between them. A quiet agreement. A full circle ache. You know what I was scared of the most? James asked. Nancy shook her head. That you'd moved on. That someone else would be holding your heart when I finally figured out how to hold it right. There was never anyone else, she whispered. Why not? Because there's only ever been one man who could walk into a room and steal the breath from my lungs, without even trying. That man let you down. That man is holding me right now. She leaned up and kissed the space just beneath his jaw. Then his collarbone. Then his lips. Not hungry. Not rushed. Just right. When they finally pulled apart, the weight between them had lifted. Not erased, but transformed. No longer pain. Now, a promise. And just like that, the night softened around them. No longer just a balcony under moonlight, but a sacred place where hate confessed its true name, fear. And hope, dressed in a woman's voice, called that fear home. The city faded beneath them. The world outside their penthouse balcony kept turning, but inside, everything stilled. They didn't move for a while. Not out of hesitation, but because the moment finally allowed them to breathe without defense. James reached for Nancy's fingers, threading them between his own, as if he was relearning the right to hold her like that. Slowly, tenderly. "It's strange," he murmured. "All this time, I thought I had to fight to earn your forgiveness. I never imagined it could come with a kiss." Nancy turned toward him, her voice low. "That's because love was never a battlefield for me. Not with you. Not really." "Then what was it?" She held his gaze. "It was a room I waited in, alone, quiet, hoping you'd find the key." He pulled her gently toward him, letting her rest her cheek against his chest. His heart thudded against her ear, strong and warm, no longer caged in guilt. "I was scared love would come with a ledger," he confessed. "That you'd tally every wound I gave you. Then you don't understand love." She tilted her face up to his. "Love doesn't come with a ledger. It comes with a choice." James leaned down and kissed her forehead, the corners of her eyes, the tip of her nose, each one like a wordless apology. Nancy didn't stop him. She welcomed it, for every kiss felt like the undoing of something that once bound them both. She lifted her hands to his face, fingers brushing his jaw. "There's a letter," she said quietly. "A letter? I wrote it years ago, when the house was too quiet and my heart too loud. Where is it?" "In my drawer, bottom left. I never mailed it." He looked down at her, brows furrowed. "What does it say?" "Everything I didn't have the strength to scream when you left." He nodded, solemnly. "Will you read it to me?" Nancy stepped back, not in rejection, but to gather her breath. She disappeared into the bedroom. James waited, heart pacing again, this time for reasons far different from fear. When she returned, she held a folded sheet of paper, the edges slightly worn, as if it had been opened and closed too many times. Nancy sat on the couch. James sat across from her. She didn't look at him as she read. "Dear James, I hope someday you read this and wonder why I never sent it. Maybe because I was too tired. Maybe because I was too proud. Or maybe because I knew words could never compete with silence, yours or mine. You left like it was the only answer. Like my breaking was contagious, and if you stayed, you'd never heal. But you never asked if I wanted healing or simply your arms around me while I cried. I wanted you to hold me during the barren months, to say we're enough, even if the doctors said otherwise. But you didn't. You watched me drown and called it love." James's hands clenched on his lap. She kept going, voice steady but raw. "But here's the truth, James. I didn't write this to curse you. I wrote it to set myself free, because every time I held in the pain, it turned to bitterness. And I didn't want to become that woman, the one who closes doors because someone else forgot how to knock. I loved you, still do, but not the way I did when I was young and hopeful. Now I love you with eyes wide open, knowing you're flawed, knowing you ran, knowing you hurt me. And still, I'd choose you in every life." Nancy lowered the paper, her eyes shining with tears. James had none left. He crossed the room in 2 strides and knelt in front of her. "I don't deserve that kind of love." "Maybe not," she whispered, brushing her fingers against his temple. "But you finally started to live up to it. You make me want to." Their lips met, not in hunger, not in desperation, but in quiet reverence. It was a kiss of renewal, a kiss of re-entry, a kiss without shields. He pulled her gently into his lap. Nancy curled into him, her legs over his thighs, her robe slipping slightly at the shoulder. He pressed his lips to her skin, his hands splayed wide over the curve of her back. Their bodies moved with unspoken language, not the fire of unresolved tension, not the rage of past betrayal, just closeness, connection, skin against skin, without armor. "Do you remember the last time you kissed me like this?" She murmured into his neck. "No," he admitted, "but I want to remember this one forever." "Then don't rush it." "I won't." He lifted her slowly, carrying her across the suite. He didn't slam the door shut. He didn't throw her on the bed. He laid her down gently, like a fragile hope finally rediscovered. Then he lay beside her and held her, for minutes, for hours, for everything they'd missed. It wasn't fury that healed the wound. It wasn't apology. It wasn't even time. It was something softer, a kiss, given without defense, asked without fear, received without question. Because sometimes healing doesn't need grand gestures or desperate pleas. Sometimes it needs only one thing, a gentle kiss, not a war. My beautiful family, we've reached the end of today's heartfelt journey. If this story has touched your soul, don't leave quietly. Let your voice be heard. Drop a comment below with "I am with you, Dr. Phillips, so I know you're part of this family." Your thoughts, feelings, and reactions matter here more than you know. Don't forget to hit the like button to show your love, and if you're new, subscribe, so you never miss a single story that heals, inspires, and strengthens us all. Share this video with someone who needs a little light today. Until next time, keep love alive.